Okay guys, so let's have a look at AMD. On Friday, May 17th, stock closed at 164, rejecting from its 50-day moving average. And here's what I'm watching. So basically, after reporting earnings and flushing down to almost like testing its 200-day moving average, this red line on my chart, it did have quite a bit of a rally, but it wasn't until this past week or so where it had pretty decent rally overall semiconductors. Until then, you can see it was killing a lot of premium by moving sideways and chopping around for quite some time. So here's what I'm watching in terms of technical levels, and then what happened with option market last Friday. So if we zoom out to daily chart, you can see from the highs had a very steep pullback. You can call it as a correction, but right here right now where the stock is sitting at this price, you can see this range where there are so many let me zoom in a little bit and just put this into perspective, where you can see how price action look at this like square between 180 and 165, how long it did spend in this range, and how much volume it traded in range, and how many people are in there will be putting pressure if the stock gets into this range. The probability of this stock flying through 180 in case if it gets back above its 50-day moving average, which is 167 at the moment, probability of it pushing higher is, in my opinion, very low, because these people, it has to digest for quite some time, and if it does, it has to break it for a fundamental reason. But again, we will have Nvidia reporting earnings, very big event next week. So that's the resistance to the upside, 180 if we do clean the 50-day moving average. But right here, right now, as long as stock stays below this 165, that's where it's actually 164.50. You can see it was resistance, 164.50. It can definitely go lower and back to test 200-day moving average. After this huge move in 4 days or so, it was basically gapping up every single day. Gap up, run, gap up, run, gap up, run. And I mean, on Thursday's gap, it did fill the gap almost. But here's what happened in terms of option activity. It was the highest traded option, like top 5 on Friday, with 1.2 million options traded, where almost 69% of the volume was call and 30% puts. So in my opinion, just by taking a look at the statistics of the option activity that day, let's have a look at this chart right here, were 843,000 calls, 383,000 puts traded. And if you pay attention to delta right here at the bottom, you see the volume, percentage of the volume from total for that day alone. You can see that most of the volume that traded that day was almost 90% was from 0 to 60 delta, which is typically indication that big smart money selling calls, that's what usually they do sell outside of the call. But if positioning was bullish, indeed bullish, you would see a lot of most of the flow between 60 to 100, where they try to stay closer to 1 delta, where they're not going to risk buying far outside of the money calls to capitalize. To reduce the risk, they typically, like big money, millions of like options that come in, where you have some sort of urgency to the upside when they want to buy calls and they think that stock can push higher, they trade these deltas from 60 to 100. But right here, right now, again, this is just my opinion that these flows that came in, 68% of the calls, they were sells, hence why stock pulled back. Same thing happened with Nvidia, because going into next week where Nvidia reports earnings, AMD is implying slightly higher IV. You can see IV is slightly elevated, 55% almost, for May 24th, where stock is implying that it can move around $9.20 up or down. So that's the expected price, basically, range according to option market IV, implied volatility. Of course, it can move more or less, but that's what option activity is pricing. AMD's like average true range on a daily for the past like 14 days, it has been $6 range for the day. But that's what I'm watching. So I do think that AMD can chop around, and if it does try to get into this range of 170s, it will have a lot of pressure from these people that are sitting here. A lot of sellers, a lot of resistance. That's what it is, a lot of supply. But again, this is my opinion. This is the update for AMD. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.